and welcome to An Evening with Nirvana. It's a podcast where I talk to a series of guests from the Doom community about level design, map creation, and other facets of game development. Today's episode of the podcast, I'll be talking to Armoured Blood, one of the OGs of slaughter mapping, creator of New Gothic Movement 1 and 2, Shai'tan's Luck, and a contributor to Slaughterfest 2012. Welcome to the podcast, Armoured. How are you doing today?
Hey, not too bad. Just hanging out, you know?
Talking about Final Fantasy 14 for like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that.
So I always start the podcast off with the same question to get a gauge on the early years. How did you first get into Doom?
Well, I used to play. My dad had it a long time ago, and I played a little bit when I was like, I don't know, 10 or 12. Mostly just watching him play it, but I didn't really get into it until I found the CDs again when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting like that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. People tend to play it a bit when they're a kid and then come back to it much later on.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was kind of going off in a different direction, but yeah. What do you got?
I was curious just which iWord you enjoyed initially.
So I had the Ultimate Doom CDs for my dad, and I didn't actually play Doom 2 for I don't even remember how long. It was like maybe like 3 or 6 months when I first started getting back into it again in college. So yeah, I really enjoyed the Ultimate Doom. I didn't actually play Plutonia or TNT until way longer, quite a while after.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And did you find that like were Plutonia and TNT kind of influential at all on you, or at that point had you already been like playing P-Words and stuff?
I would say Plutonia more. I didn't really. TNT was kind of more the same of like Ultimate Doom in some ways. Like it was had a different feel in some ways, but it was never one of my favorite iWads. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And
definitely more Plutonia influence.
uh-huh. And so when you came back from college, was it pretty soon after that you got into like custom content and P-Words and stuff?
Well, that's kind of the funny thing. I did most of my Doom uh, mapping and stuff in college. I kind of fell off of it after graduating.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, because I went for 2 years of community and like three-ish of like a CSU, like one of the state universities. I had like five-ish years of college. So that's that's most of the time when I was mapping, just kind of like the pressure and the focus of doing higher learning kind of did all that.
Mm-hmm. So did you was Doom like the first game that you ever made custom content for?
I I think so. It was either yeah, because I kind of messed around with some Skyrim mapping after, but yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was mostly Doom, and then I got a little bit into. I tried getting into like Mirror's Edge, but 3D is a different thing, and I just didn't get it at the time.
Yeah. I remember trying to look into the Skyrim editing tools as well, and it was pretty difficult to penetrate.
Yeah, Doom Builder especially is just so much easier than any other editing tool I've tried to use.
Yeah, I remember like there's a point where you have to do like AI pathing and stuff so they don't
Oh,
get caught on everything, and
yeah,
there's a lot of extra stuff that goes into 3D that you don't really
yeah.
consider when you're used to like simplistic AI and stuff. So what were like the first custom P-Words you played that were a big influence on you?
So because I started on Ultimate Doom, most of them were Doom 1 mods, and Crusades was the one that really had a big influence, I think, on what I like to do in maps, which is mostly create big Gothic areas and then try and put a bunch of mobs in them, but that's kind of a Plutonia thing. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, mostly Crusades, and then I got into Scythe and Scythe 2, and uh, Hell Revealed 1 and 2, and Alien Vendetta. There's a couple more, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
think of them right now.
I do think that was the list of WODs that I was kind of expecting.
Yeah.
Because is it Shai'tan's luck? Is that how it's pronounced? Shai'tan?
You know, that word I got from the Wheel of Time book, and I have no idea how it's pronounced.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna go
whatever you
with,
want to do,
yeah.
I don't really care. It's like some I think it's an Islamic religious term, but I haven't really looked into it. It was just, this is cool. I'm going to use it for the name of my map. So
Okay. Well, if anybody knows, they can let me know very angrily. Uh,
probably.
we'll go with Shai'tan for now. But it's one of your early projects, and definitely feels like it. Like I felt the Hell Revealed influence in it. I
Yeah.
feel like has that more feeling of like regular spaces, but with a focus on killing like a lot of mid tiers and stuff.
hmm
Were you basically just making like combat that you enjoyed back then, or were you kind of like trying to carve out a niche with like more slaughtery gameplay that you felt was maybe missing at the time?
That was, it's, I want to say that most of the stuff I was doing was just kind of like, this is a cool encounter I wanted to make, but I hadn't quite gotten to that point yet, where it was kind of just like I was throwing down ideas that I thought looked cool, and then putting in some gameplay that I thought was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like the later stuff I was working on, where it was kind of more like this is a cool idea I want to work on and try and make it work, and then I'll add in the aesthetics later.
Yeah, and this one and New Gothic Movement, I would say they have like fairly loose slaughter in terms of monster placement. Like they're a bit less about fixed setups. Do you tend to prefer that kind of gameplay where it's a little bit looser?
Yeah, I guess so, because it's like I compare the stuff I make to stuff like uh I don't know, Italo Doom is like the one that is like big in my mind right now, where it's like you have to have an exact set of movements and
Mm-hmm.
priorities to kill to actually get through that map set. And it's just like most of the stuff I did was just like, I really like the rocket launcher, I really like the BFG. So it's like if you can make strategic use of those a little bit, you can kind of go around and make a little space for you, because that's like a big part of Doom gameplay theory is how much space you can give the player and how much like ammo and stuff to have that balance go in. So for most of it, like the early stuff, it was kind of just like, this is really cool. I'm just gonna put as much stuff in as I can, and if I can beat it, that's great. If I can't beat it, I'll make it a little easier for myself. But I think that's how that went.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is like the key to making good large scale slaughter, like at least in your opinion?
Well, have it be visually interesting, because there's if it's just like a big box room with like a bunch of mobs in it, it kind of it's really interesting to see it at first, but then it's kind of boring to just be in there and just shooting the same things over and over again. But yeah, have kind of challenging encounters where it's like you have to do a specific like a direction of attack, and then you move around, make space for yourself. Um, I don't. This is. Hmm.
It's a
I might
tough
need to
one.
have a little more thinking on that one.
Maybe we can come back to it. Um,
Yeah.
so moving on to New Gothic Movement. Do you remember like where the original idea for that word came from?
I'm pretty sure it was just I saw the Gothic texture pack, and I'm just like, that's cool. I want to make something with it, and yeah, I just started making stuff with it and the kind of loose style I had at the time, which is heading towards Slaughter. Yeah.
Hmm. So textures are like a pretty big deal for you in terms of like what inspires you to make a map set, I guess.
Oh yeah,
Because yeah.
yeah, textures and music. Like I was, I had just kind of discovered symphonic metal at the time, I think, because oh damn, I can't remember his name exactly right now. There was a guy who used the Pharaoh Sails to Orion from Nightwish in one of his maps,
Mhm.
and that really inspired me to go in that direction of like the gothic feel and all the symphonic metal midis I could find.
Mhm. Yeah, because I know that you had a WOD later on. It was like a Celtic house, and you made
Uh,
that entirely because of the textures from what what it said in the text
yeah,
file.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's fun to do.
so at the time when New Gothic was released, it was considered like super difficult. I mean, it's still a pretty tough one now. What kind of difficulty were you aiming for, really? You said that you basically at the time just tended to make things like uh challenging for yourself and then balance backwards if it was too hard. Was that mostly your ethos with the one?
Pretty much. It's this was like a decade ago, so it's like you have to think back all that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just make it as hard as I could do it, and then try and get through. Like I was like I really like um demos of watching people play the maps I make and do demos, but I'm actually a very I'm pretty bad at I was pretty bad at that, so I'd do a lot of saver loading, and
Hmm.
I have very few like actual like I've completed this map from start to finish without dying. But yeah, a lot of trying that, just trial and error and bounce around that.
Hmm. And so would you usually make fights as hard as possible and then nerf them from there, kind of thing?
A lot of the time, yes, but sometimes they would be I would I think I'd go a little easy on some of them, so I'd have to actually add a few more things or like because I was never really big on difficulty levels, so all of my stuff is balanced for ultraviolence, and then I just kind of like remove or add a little bit of items and stuff to lower difficulties. But yeah,
Hmm.
just usually try and go like hard, and then I'll take out like one or two Hell Knights or something, or like if there's too many revenants.
Hmm. And could you talk a little bit about like creating a difficulty curve for that kind of slaughter? What do you generally attempt to do to make like interesting, easy slaughter fights, for instance? For instance.
Well, mostly just add a bunch of ammo and health and heavy weapons. So you just can always be using the BFG or the rocket launcher and have plenty of. You can take plenty of hits. And it's mostly just. I think most of the fail states are just you come in and you get cornered. Like that was, I think, the biggest part of my mapping was like always trying to make fights where you try not to get cornered, which is you can say that for most slaughter maps, but
Hmm. And what about like the difficulty curve for the WoD? Were you thinking about that consciously as you were playing, or like were the maps created in order, for instance, or did you jump around?
So in New Gothic 1 and Shai'tan's Luck, I did them completely in chronological order. So they're very the difficulty jumps around a bunch. But in New Gothic 2, Archie and I we actually tried to make them like its scale of difficulty. So like in the early ones, like for each individual map, I'd try and have like a starting point and then an end point in difficulty, I think. But mostly it was about trying to make all the set pieces work as set pieces and not really like try and move them around at all. So
Mhm.
most of the time I wouldn't actually do like a difficulty scaling, I think.
Right. Okay. I was curious about I suppose in terms of a difficulty curve because it fits into an interesting place, but I was curious about map 3 of New Gothic Movement, which is
Oh yeah.
the one full of cyber demons.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
made you put that map so early in the WoD? Do you remember?
So I think it's because I had just done two very intense, like these are extremely gothic maps with a lot of difficulty, and then the third one was kind of just me being like, all right, this is going to be a secret map, and I kind of just left it there. I'm just
Right.
like, ah, it's become a thing. I've released it to the public. I don't want to move it.
So that was
It's just kind of
like
a fun
originally
one.
intended for like the 31, 32 slot.
Yeah, I think so. It's been quite a while.
That's interesting. Um, so there are like a lot of texture themes in New Gothic Movement and also New Gothic Movement too. Do you tend to get bored of just using one theme throughout a WoD? Is it like a conscious decision to change the theme up a lot?
I think that was just me finding new texture packs as I was, because it takes quite a while sometimes to make the maps, and I think New Gothic 1 took a good 6 months at least, maybe a year or two. And it was just like after a couple months, like somebody would bring up a texture pack, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. How can I put that in? And I never go back to the older maps and try and change them to fit that. So it was always kind of like an evolution of where I started from to all the different things that I'd seen that were cool and I'd want to bring in.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that can definitely happen where you're working with a texture set and then you just find like a couple of textures that you really want to use and that can inform an entire map or an entire couple of maps.
Yeah.
I feel like map 6 was always one of the most memorable for me. Um, were you really wanting to like play with verticality for this map, or did the layout happen like pretty naturally during the mapping process?
A really funny question because that map idea didn't actually start with me. I was hanging out with some friends, and I had mentioned to one of my friends that I didn't quite know too well at the time that I did doom mapping, and he's like, "Oh man, you should do this cool idea for a doom map." And I'm like, "All right, cool, man. We'll do the verticality thing where it's like slowly sinking in and then into the ground of the map." And I had to figure out how to make that work in Doom because it's not like you can just be like, yeah, this area sinks into the ground and stuff. It has to be the sectors, they all have to have line defs pointing at lower level stuff. So a lot of the map, there's like in that main central area, there's like, I think there's a diagonal line where it's just like a pixel wide and it's just the bottom of the map. And so everything in around that sinks into it,
Mm-hmm.
into like the map rising, like the lava in the map rising. It's everything is sinking down, and that's what happened there. So yeah, I didn't actually come up with that idea. I stole it from someone else.
So, but it was there from the beginning. You sort of did build it with that intention, I guess.
Oh yeah, I started from the middle and then I went out and I'm like, yeah, let's ascend this really cool mining area that I had come up with these giant like blocky structures of like pipes and stuff. And I came up with like the pipe elevator lift thing and copy pasted that in a bunch of different places. It was cool.
Hmm. So what was like the general process for building a map for New Gothic? Did you do a lot of general planning beforehand, or was it like pretty free flowing overall?
Kind of depended on the maps. Some of them I would like draw out in class when I was in college classes, or like there's a lot of time where I was in like the student union building, which is kind of just like a building with a bunch of students with at tables doing their homework and stuff, and I had a laptop and I was just making the maps there, or like I was at the cafeteria at other the first college I went to, and I'd make maps in there. I don't think I was working in Gothic there though, but I'm sorry. What was the question? I got sidetracked. What was the question again?
Just about the process for building a map, about
Oh
whether
yeah,
it was mostly planned or pretty free flowing.
yeah. So it was like I had like this engineering paper, which is like one side you have the graph, or the it's like graph paper on one side and the other side's notes. So I draw out the maps on the blocks, make it like kind of square or diagonal and stuff, and then I'd have like notes on the back for a couple of them. And other ones I'd kind of just go in with an idea and kind of map it out in large chunks in Doom Builder and then kind of refine a bit.
Hmm.
But most of them, I had like, I would come up with an idea and try and make it work. And a lot of those worked, and then a couple others just didn't work as I wanted it to. Like in map 7 of New Gothic, um, where it's the big, the white pebbles area and stuff. I wanted that to be more cave-like, but instead I went for a big open area,
Hmm.
and that's like one of the things that I kind of wanted to go back to in New Gothic 2, but I never did.
Right. Building some kind of cave structure, you mean?
Yeah,
Hmm. So,
like I oh
oh, you continue.
oh well, I was just gonna add on. I've done like caves and other ones. Like I can't remember exactly which map in New Gothic 1, but I had like that whole mine system. But it wasn't gonna be like that. It was gonna be like more of a natural cave with like the white textures. But yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you like sort of a healthy mix between like doing some pre-planning and then letting the map flow while you're building it as well, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, like I'd have like a general idea I wanted to go with, and a lot of the time I'd write it down, but sometimes I just start mapping.
Yeah. What do you think are some like key elements to making fights in Doom that are interesting in larger spaces, like when you're having to build things on a big scale?
Hmm. I think having like a clear goal of where to go is kind of big. You need to be able to see like, all right, this room is this big. You have a start point and there's like an end point. But sometimes you want like that curve for stuff like revenants where they can do the homing. But it's hmm.
Hmm. Do you think there are any particular like structural elements to it that make it easier to like uh make an encounter work in a big space?
Well, sometimes you want to have like blocking pillars so stuff isn't just like chain gunning you from forever away across the map or like revenant missiles. But sometimes you want that pressure to kind of move you around or have infighting happen. And a lot of one of the things you want to avoid a lot with Slaughter is if you don't want infighting, you need to make sure you stop it from happening because it
Yeah.
can really mess up a map. Like you'll go from like the map's really hard to everything's just gonna fight itself. And you're like, well, great.
Yeah, I think like cyber demons as a tool, for instance. I think a lot of the time people forget that like cybers can make fights incredibly easy if they're used correctly.
Oh yeah, yeah. You just bring a big mob over to them, and then they just fight them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they can clear out a lot of space for you in fights for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the things that I would always try to remember when I'm playing Slaughter maps is that you don't have to go immediately hard in. You can just let things kind of happen, and a lot of the testing I would have to do that where it's like I want to play this one way, but if you play a totally different way, it's so much easier. And the fight's like, well, all right, then now I have to change it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing with testing is sometimes people will just approach an encounter in a way that you absolutely never thought of during testing yourself.
Nope. So you gotta have a lot of testers.
Yeah. Uh, I feel like New Gothic overall sort of tends to put fun before difficulty, I would say. Do you think there are other WODs that kind of focus a little too heavily on being the most difficult WOD out there and maybe lose some of that that fun element sometimes?
Well, I could say Italo Doom, but I think that was kind of the intention. Where
Right.
it's just like this isn't actually that fun. This is just a thing. Um, so I really like Time of Death's. Uh, a lot of his map ideas are really cool, but a lot of the actually playing it is like it could be I don't know about easier, but just like you could I don't know. That was one of the things where it's like I like this, but I don't like this at the same time. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, I think
But yeah,
Todd, you can't even complain about that because he demos all his own stuff, so you're just not even
yeah,
allowed. He'll just come in, make some really difficult map, and then he'll be like, "And here's the demo for it to prove that it's totally fine, actually." So, what are you
yeah,
gonna do?
yeah. It's just some people just have different tastes for things, and it's like I just kind of like the way I play, and then just make it a little easier so I can keep playing it and not. I don't know. I had a weird thing with challenge where it's like after a certain amount of effort put in, I'm just kind of like, I'll just do something else. It's
Do you
not too good for that.
did you sort of tend to play difficult like games as a kid, or and like do you play difficult games these days, like Dark Souls and things like that?
I don't think I really did play difficult games as a kid. Like I would go for like the kind of the cerebral challenging ones where it's kind of like puzzles a little bit, but with gameplay. So it's not like a pure like Tetris type puzzle or something. But
Hmm.
like one of the ones I really liked playing was Super Monkey Ball, where you'd had like all these puzzle stages and you have
Hell
to
yeah.
move the ball to the goal stuff. And that was really fun for me, but I didn't really like seek out like the really challenging games. Like I never really played the Super Mario on the NES and stuff like that. But I did play Dark Souls 1 and that was pretty good. Pretty good. I mostly enjoyed the story behind it. I didn't really like the very exacting combat and stuff was kind of interesting, but a lot of the time I'm just kind of like, really? That's what you're gonna do? That's how you're gonna kill me? I'm like, all right, fine. Yeah.
So challenge isn't necessarily like at the core of like uh why you wanted to make Doom mods, for instance.
No, a lot of it was just like the challenge was kind of like this is my skill level. I want to challenge myself a little bit, but not way too much that I'm stuck on a fight forever. It's there's a couple of times I had that with some other stuff, my own maps. Yeah.
Hmm. Uh, I think map 13 of New Gothic is probably one of the most ambitious maps in the WoD. Did you know with that map, did you have like a pre-planned idea of the big city already before starting?
Oh man, I know I have. Damn man, I used to have all my drawings somewhere, but I think they're. I should have grabbed them out before this, but yeah, I did actually. I think that's one of the ones I had like mapped out where it's like I have all these giant skyscrapers and stuff. I had always wanted to do one of those big city maps, and it's just like all the other ones I had seen were just not quite big enough.
Right.
I'm like, you just gotta have the whole survivor thing. There's actually I've always kind of had that little streak of being interested in like the zombie apocalypse type stuff or like just monsters invading. So that was one of the cool things there. I think I but as for the actual map itself, a lot of that I think I was just making the bigger outer shells first, and then I was like placing a key where I thought it'd be kind of a interesting spot to add like a big like a bunch of things come in and fight because a lot of the mobs that are spawned in there are kind of just random imps and hell knights and I think a bunch of zombie men that just come in waves from the sides.
Hmm.
They're not really planned at all in the big areas, but then in the interior where you get the actual fights, like the Cyber Demon hangar with the Arc Files, that was planned out. Uh, I can't remember if I like put it to paper first or if I just went straight in to the Doom Builder.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, for encounters, you would have like a good idea of what you wanted to do combat wise in a space before you started building.
Sometimes, sometimes not. I think in there's one map in New Gothic 2 that I like had a bunch of ideas planned out for. It's like that one it was kind of like I revisited one of the New Gothic 1 maps, but I kind of made it like a I need to open the map to actually look at it. But okay, I've sidetracked myself. What was the question again?
Um,
Why is this happening so much?
I think it was just about pre-planning encounters, like whether you like to have a concept of like what combat you're gonna have in an area before you build it or not.
Yeah, I think most of the time I had very vague ideas. Like, unless I wrote it down exactly how I was going to try and make it work, it was just kind of like this is a spot where this type of fight would work. And I would put it in and change it depending on how it would go. And sometimes it was in some other places, I'd be just like, all right, I want to mess around with these monsters and see how they work together. That was Yeah, that was mostly New Gothic 1 and Shai'tan's Luck that I did that with. Not so much later in New Gothic 2, I think.
The New Gothic 2 was like a bit more structured, do you think?
Yeah, it was kind of like this is what I learned from New Gothic 1 and all my other maps and all the other stuff I'd played. I had a bit of a formula, I think, at the time, a lot more than New Gothic 1. And it
Hmm.
was just kind of coming up with things I wanted to use in the formula and stuff. It's hard to say sometimes because
Yeah.
there's just a different place.
And so with map 13, did you have that concept right away about like wanting to slowly like fill the city up with monsters?
I'm not too sure. I think it was just kind of a consequence of, did I want to start with all the mobs inside the city, or did I want it to have pressure later on as you're clearing each place? And I think it just kind of started with, I think I kind of just went with the idea of I want the pressure later instead of like all this stuff is already there. And
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of pacifist a little bit to keep all the stuff from spawning in for a little while if you want to as a strategy. But yeah, because everything's like all sound activated.
Yeah. Did you often think about like pacifist and speedrunning techniques and stuff when you built maps?
Uh, Not at first. Like it was more of like a later on. Actually, when I was doing Plutonia Revisited, I had a map in there, and one of the testers I talked to a lot was Do, and from that point on, I actually sent a lot of my stuff to Do, and he's kind of a speedrunner tester, so not really Slaughter, and so a lot of the stuff I'd actually make with him in mind a little bit to try and like this would be a cool thing to do as like a speed run or something. So a lot of later stuff, I think you can kind of get a little bit of a feel for like a speed run approach, but also I had to keep in the Slaughter stuff because that's just kind of what I do. So
Yeah.
it messes with it a bit.
Uh, like map 13, you often sort of like to have large spaces that slowly get more and more populated. And the player has to manage like a mass of monsters, like your 2012 map, for instance, the SF 2012 one. Uh, you mentioned like enjoying survival horror stuff. Do you think that's where that kind of setup comes from?
Maybe. Uh, it's hard to say because I would probably it probably was like a small influence or something. I don't really like the horror genre so much. I like the survival aspect of it. So it's like maybe I got some of it from there, but I think a lot of it was from like my early influences from uh doing like all the maps I played earlier, like Scythe and Scythe 2 and Hill Revealed and stuff. I think that had more of an influence.
Mm-hmm. And probably also a bit of I guess like you were saying, like just by virtue of the fact that some of these maps are so gigantic, you have to find ways to like populate the space maybe a little more slowly so the player uh can't just like wipe things out with tons of infighting or whatever right off the bat, things like that.
Yeah, like I think I realized the infighting thing a bit later in New Gothic 1 development. I don't It's hard to say because it's like it's a decade ago, but I'm pretty sure I didn't really think about it until later. It might have been like I was unconsciously doing it, but yeah.
I was kind of curious about the the gigantic pyramid in map 15. I was wondering where the idea
Oh,
for that map came about. Do you remember?
I don't really remember exactly. I think I'm just like was thinking if anything, I think it's which I think there was a I think it was an Alien Vendetta map that had the pyramid in it. It was like 21 or something.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah. And I had seen that and I'm like, I don't want to do that in the map. But let's make it tech gothic hell or something like that. I don't know. And from there, I'm just kind of like, all right, do I want to make this? You can't really do the flat diagonal surfaces in Doom unless you do Z Doom
Hmm.
stuff. So I'm like, all right, so this kind of has to go for like the Mayan style of step pyramids or something. But anyway, it was just like I have to make it like that, and the all the pillars that came out around the sides were kind of just like, all right, so you kind of break it up so it's not just like a big wide area with the thing in the middle.
Yeah.
And I liked the kind of lava moat outside area that was also kind of like the secret map portal. The way to get that.
Yeah, because I would think building combat on a map that's built that way would be pretty difficult.
It's honestly, I think that one was one of the maps that was just kind of like, this is a really cool idea, and at the end of the day, the combat kind of suffers a little bit because it's kind of just like you have all these guys on the side of the pyramid shooting at you. You eventually have the cyber demons come in, and you have to do the BFG trick to kill them in like 2 or 3 shots, and manage your invuln spheres and all the stuff around it. And it's like it kind of forced me into making the combat that way because you can't use the same monsters for the same. Just different monsters would not work for that.
Yeah. Um. So Slaughterfest 2012, your first map in it, Decimal Era, has 10,000 monsters in it. Were you just sort of trying to push the boundaries of the engine a little bit with this map, or like what was the original
So,
concept?
well, the the map itself was basically to be what it was. The thing, the reason why it's called decimal error is because at one point I was calculating how many mobs to put in there, and I think I miscalculated.
Right.
by I guess a decimal point. So instead of like the 1,000 or 2,000 I was going for, it ended up being like 10,000. So and then everybody in Slaughterfest liked it that way, so it stayed that way.
So what were you calculating? What was the calculation for how many
I
monsters to go?
think I think it's because of the teleporter boxes. I was just like, all right, so for X amount of time, I need stuff to be teleporting in to make pressure. So it will put in X amount of mobs. But I miscalculated by like I don't know. It's been a while. I don't quite remember exactly what I was shooting for. I just remember I think it was the teleporter boxes, where it's just like too many.
Too big of a box, and you just had to fill the whole thing.
Well, I think I never changed the size of the teleporter box. I'm just like, all right, there's too many mobs in the box. Let's delete like half of them or something.
Right. Um, I've always thought of like Slaughterfest 2012 as a really important one in terms of like that era of Slaughter. Did it seem
Mm.
like it was that way at the time with all the people that were joining the project?
It seemed like all the big names and all the people in the community at that time for Slaughter were involved in it in some way. I There might have been like one or two that are just like not interested in doing a community map, but it was pretty much everybody I think at the time that was into the idea and had actually been mapping that were interested in it and did it.
Mm-hmm. And did you? I know that like I've talked to people like Danny and Ribix and stuff a little bit, and um there was definitely like a bit of a sense of like a rivalry between the Slaughter scene and you know like regular mappers. Did you did you feel that at the time?
It was definitely kind of like two slightly different like takes on the community, I guess. It wasn't like a real division, like this isn't Doom or something. It was just kind of like ah, I don't know. It's like the different genres of movies or something. Like somebody can be into horror, and I'm like, I don't like horror at all. all right. They both like movies, but yeah.
Hmm. This feels like
It
a
was
way too
definitely.
reasonable of a take, I think. Where's the outrage?
Well, probably a decade ago. So,
Okay. Do you think at the time you were like a little bit more serious about it?
probably because I was definitely more active in the community than that I am now. Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't know if we wanted to bring it up, but I like haven't made a map in like 5 years. I haven't really been on Doom World in quite a while. So, you know.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been a few people I've spoken to who are definitely on quite a hiatus from mapping or quote unquote retired, maybe.
Yep.
Uh, so, like you worked on a lot of community projects as well throughout the years, like Mayhem and Abyssal Speed Mapping and a bunch of others. Did you
Mhm.
generally find them to be like a good way to get like quick ideas out that you didn't necessarily want to use in a full project, or like what did you enjoy about doing those?
I It was mostly the limitations because they would always come with like a limit. Like the claustrophobia one, you could only do in a 1024 by 1024 box and stuff. Or
Hmm.
like Mayhem, I think had set prompts. Or I actually liked doing some of the DM ones because it's like I'm never gonna play those because I don't play PvP that much. But it's like cool, you guys like the style, but it's like because it's a DM map, it has to be like mirrored in some ways. So areas would have to be the same, but slightly different.
Hmm.
But it was mostly the challenge in those was working with the limitations to make something different from what I normally would do without any restraints. So it was cool that, and then just talking to people, having testers do stuff and be like, oh, a lot of feedback.
Hmm.
It was
And
fun.
so you found that like to be, do you think it was like a useful tool for getting better at mapping in general?
Yeah, it was definitely good for that because there's a lot of people in the community and a lot of them have been mapping for longer than I have and know a couple of ins and outs. But yeah, there and then people would have like a bunch of different takes on stuff depending on what maps they preferred and stuff. So having testers for that was interesting for trying to make a kind of like because some of those projects you had to kind of like make a slightly uniform thing where you're all using the same textures and stuff and mobs and
Hmm.
you have an idea in there. Interesting learning from that.
Yeah. And uh, you talked about making the deathmatch maps. Do you think like that made you think about map making in a different way, like in terms of maybe like interconnectivity and like keeping like the interesting movement of like having a circuit and stuff that you can go around, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. Because I won't. I probably wasn't thinking of it at the time, but it definitely changed how I thought about some different maps. It's really funny when you said circuit. I was just thinking of New Gothic map. Wait, there's the second one that had yeah, yeah, the second New Gothic map. New Gothic. Sorry, let me start over. New Gothic 2 map 7.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking when you said circuit, I'm just kind of like because of the F-Zero music. Wait, was that 7? I think it was 7.
uh I think so. Yeah, I can't remember either. I just played it the other night in preparation, but I've forgotten already.
Yeah. But anyway about the differences between PvP. It's they're just different styles and it's like I never really played those, so I couldn't like refine how I was going to go about making them. But it's definitely a different thing to make a DM map than a slaughter or even just a normal style of Doom map.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose you need things like symmetry for balancing reasons, and uh, the balancing is like done in completely different ways, I would imagine, geometrically.
Yeah, yeah. I never joined any of the DM testing stuff, so I can't say how that went, but it's different.
So do you think community projects are like a pretty good way for new mappers to start off, or do you think people are like maybe better off trying to make their own WODs initially?
I think I think it's better to start on your own thing as far as a first map goes, just so you put out the ideas you want to put out, and then you go to the community WODs once you have a bit of experience and you know kind of what you like to make a little bit, but not necessarily like you're set in your ways, I guess. Kind of like uh, kind of like experiment with what you want at first, and then you go to the community WODs to like challenge yourself a little bit with limitations and be like trying to think of out of the box ways to do certain stuff that you haven't done before.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind
Um,
of like the mid level, I guess I would say. You have like you start off doing your own thing, and then you have like a little mid level. You enter the community and you kind of mess around trying to make stuff for that, and then you kind of go back to yourself and kind of refine it, and you can like cycle over and over if you want.
yeah, there are definitely people who take part in a lot of community projects.
Hmm.
Just continually joining them, it seems.
Yeah.
Um, what made you want to make like a sequel to New Gothic, around the time that you
Well,
started New
the
Gothic?
the whole reason I finished New Gothic 1 because it's only 17 or 18 maps. It's like 1 through 16 plus 31 and 32. Yeah, but the whole reason I finished that was I had been working for like 2 years on it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I need a break. I need to work on something else. And instead of just like leaving it on the wayside for a little while, I'm like, all right, this is enough maps. I'm just going to release it and then do something else. And then for New Gothic 2, I was just kind of back in the mood to make those types of maps again. And I was talking to Archie, and we're just like, cool, let's do some maps together, and it worked out.
Yeah. So, what role did Archie play in New Gothic Movement 2? How much of the work did he end up doing?
I think it was half the maps.
Right.
I haven't checked recently to see exactly how many it is, but like we'd like send maps to each other and be like, does this does this work? Do you like this and stuff? And like maybe what would you change about it and stuff? And I honestly don't remember exactly how much input I had. I think it was just kind of like, this is really cool. Maybe add like this little fight or like a little tweak or something on there and stuff. But it was like we kind of agreed on the textures we would use first, and we talk about like the music a little bit. But I don't think I ever like we didn't really have like a big like, oh, this music doesn't work for this map or anything like that. I think it was just kind of like, yeah, this is cool, let's keep doing it. And there's like some stuff with the node builder. There's one map, there was a couple maps where it was like the node builder was always weird, and I'm just like, is this a Russian versus US thing where it's just like our computers just don't build the nodes the same way or something? And I'm like, all right, well, we'll do it Archie's way because I don't really do multiplayer too much in testing, and I guess he'd done that, so it's like, all right, we'll go with those nodes, and they work mostly.
So the collaborative process was very like you pretty much both did some work on every map, kind of thing.
I don't know about every map. It was just kind of like we had our own maps, and we'd have like feedback on each other's maps. And I don't. There might have been like one or two where we added something to each other's maps, but it was more just kind of like, this is the vision we have of the maps we want to make, and it worked together.
Hmm.
I think that's how it went.
So,
It's been a while.
I'm curious how much you feel like your approach to mapping had changed between New Gothic Movement 1 and 2.
I think it was pretty similar at the beginning of New Gothic 2 and the end of New Gothic 1, but I think it was changing at the end of 2 a little bit. Like, because I think 2 took quite a bit longer than 1 to make.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some maps in there. I don't know. It just, I think I kind of was just done after a certain point of New Gothic 2, and I'm just like, all right, let's just get it done.
Right.
That's kind of where I stopped doing a lot of mapping.
Do you think it was like a little overly ambitious maybe at a certain point? Like maybe the simpler maps of yesteryear were a bit a bit easier to output.
I don't really think that. I think it was just my changing circumstances at the time, because I graduated college somewhere near the end of New Gothic 2's development. And like I said before, when I was in college, I had like a lot of focus and like a lot of brain power invested in that, and so mapping was kind of like a little bit of an outlet for that.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was like getting a lot of the creative outlet that I couldn't do in school at all, because that's all learning. But after that, it was kind of like, well, I'm kind of just floating around, not doing much at the time. So a lot of my drive for mapping, I think,
Uh-huh.
after that.
Yeah, it can definitely be uh, a difficult thing, especially faced with like a blank canvas in front of you, and you're trying to think of
Yeah.
what to put down. That's always the worst part. Um, so the difficulty is obviously like quite a bit higher in New Gothic Movement 2. Was this because you'd gotten like better as a player, or did you want it to feel like a step up from New Gothic Movement 1, or did Archie have some influence on that?
I think I had just gotten a bit better as a player, and I didn't really allow myself the I didn't really let myself put too much extra stuff in. Like, there are a couple things where I was just like, I want to make this. It's mostly the last map, New Gothic 2, where it's kind of just like there's a certain area in there where it's got infinite mobs spawning, and I just have a ton of ammo and stuff and health and stuff. And that was like one of the few places where I really allowed myself to just be like, all right, we're just gonna nerf, well, not necessarily nerf this encounter, but it's like built to be played forever. But it gets kind of boring when it's just random mobs and they're all at the same variance of how often they come in and stuff. So it's like eventually you're just going to be done with that area.
Mm-hmm.
But there were, I don't really think I had given. I think I was just like slightly better at playing Doom, and I just had more experience dealing with slaughter maps in certain ways. And yeah, I think Archie didn't really stop me from making things easier, but he didn't. He did. Yeah, he might have made it like a little bit. I might have been a little harder on myself with Archie being there, being like, "No, this is too easy" or something. But it wasn't very often, and I didn't really get that feel at the end of it
Mm-hmm.
so much.
Well, you said you the two of you worked like a bit more strictly on a difficulty curve, uh, when you Gothic Movement 2. Was that um because you were working separately on these maps? How did you sort of figure out whose map went where in the set? Was it just like, this kind of feels like it should be a map 3 or whatever?
Yeah, we had like general ideas at the end of it, and we had some conversations about where the maps would line up and stuff. And I think we were generally in agreement on pretty much everything. It was just kind of like, although I feel like Archie kind of just was like, "Yeah, you do it, you figure it out." I'm like, "All right," on some of the maps, not all of them, but it's like, yeah, I think I think we were pretty in agreement about pretty much everything in there. I can't really think of any major disagreements we had on where maps went.
Hmm. So you didn't make like you didn't build the WOD in order for New Gothic Movement 2, like map 1, map 2.
No, I had some specific, like at a specific point, I made a map one. Was it me who made map one or Archie? I think it was me who made map one, but like
Hmm.
we had a specific idea of kind of where we're going. I think I made map one to be map one, and then the other ones kind of like filled in as they were going, and then the last map we made as the last map, and we each had a few parts that we made in there and added to the map.
Yeah. That that pit fight, I remember giving me a lot of trouble in that map. The two giant pits of monsters that you circle around.
Uh,
Was what was like your testing process like then? Was it mostly just between you and Archie, or did you have like a few other testers that you sent stuff to internally?
we had a few people. Let me check the server really quick because I do have the server on here, but nobody's on it anymore because they all left.
I think, well, you mentioned Jew, right? He was
Yeah,
so,
Dew was in there. I think we had some stuff with Encalagon, Demonologist did a little bit. I think Mr. Zool, I
uh-huh.
sent a few maps to him, and I think that was it.
So you were definitely targeting pretty decent players with this map set.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't have like I think we posted some beta builds to Doom World, but most of it was we just have our testers tell us how they thought of things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Were any of the maps in New Gothic 2 like leftover ideas or scraps from New Gothic 1 that you wanted to complete, or was it all new stuff?
I'm pretty sure it was all new stuff. I had New Gothic 1 did not have some polish in some areas. It was
Right.
just kind of like a bunch of map ideas I liked. And like map 4, it was just kind of like all of that green marble. And I'm like, I didn't care about how it looked so much. It was just like how the gameplay was, I think. And yeah, and what was the question again? I'm sorry, I went in a tangent.
Just about whether you had any leftover ideas from New Gothic 1 or scraps of maps or anything.
Nah, no, I had. Um, it's hard to say because as far as like old scraps go, most of the stuff I have, I never really looked back at.
Hmm.
Like, I have I have an external drive right now that I haven't looked at in like a decade or something, and it's just some of the stuff is like I don't remember it very well. But, like I haven't actually looked at the maps in there, but it's like they're not really things that were when I made scraps, it was like very much half baked ideas. I didn't really do a lot of fleshing out of them at all, which is like, I guess that's what a scrap is, but it's like it wasn't something I really used again. The idea might have been in the back of my head, like I want to do this in a map later, but I would never directly copy from a scrap or something like that.
Right. Because there definitely are some people. I was talking to Bemuse, and he would just have like, I don't know, like half a map built, and then he would just be able to like grab that and and dump it in and do something with it later.
No, I never really had that. If I had like half of a map, it was like I had to finish it. There's no like I either finished it or I just didn't finish it. I never used it again if I didn't finish it, I think.
So you don't really have like anything left lying around that you might eventually finish, or do you have any inclination to return to Doom mapping?
That's hard to say because it goes into the reason why I stopped doing mapping was that I felt I had done pretty much everything I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
in the original engine and stuff. Like anything I wanted to work on would be probably like 3D, like room over room type stuff. And it's just like Doom is not it is not easy to do that in Doom. It's like
Mm-hmm.
harder to do it than normal engines and stuff. Like maybe if there's like a certain map or a certain textures that come out that I'm really into, or like midis. Like midis are huge for me. Like I don't remember if we went over it very much, but like I had like a whole MIDI library that
Mm-hmm.
I would choose from for maps, and I'd like constantly listen to the original version of the music while I'm mapping, or I'd have like my Pandora playing with all the stuff that would
Mm-hmm.
get me into the feel for the map. But it's hard to say I would get back into it because it's just all the midis that are made or that are taken from stuff these days are like not really great, or you have to get like custom midis done by people.
Right.
So, yeah, pretty much every map I've made has a custom MIDI or something in it. I think.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think.
I know that Rubik said that he likes to listen to the MIDI as he's making the map as well. Like, I mean, I guess
Mm,
for him, he will compose a MIDI and then listen to that MIDI while he maps, and that kind of informs like a lot of the space that he builds.
yeah, yeah. It helps a lot with like thinking about how you're going to do something. Like there's I think it was map 11 of New Gothic 2, the big courtyard and like the castle one
Yeah.
that had the Therian music. I believe it was Therian. I hadn't actually listened to Therian very much before that, but then I was very heavily inspired by the MIDI that was playing on it. I can't remember what the song actually was right now, but yeah,
And
that
what about
happened a lot.
uh-huh. And what about like composing MIDI?
I never. So I played some instruments as a kid, and I got into like marching band and concert band and stuff, and I was never really big on making my own music. It's is too much. It was always like a too much of the music theory and not enough of the I just play around with stuff and see how it sounds. That doesn't it never really interested me to just like mess around with how things sound together too much. I like completed packages to work with as
Right.
far as music goes.
Maybe you can get into sampling, you
Maybe it's not really something I've looked into.
know. uh well, I suppose for the final question, that I ask everybody as well.
Oh,
What is your favorite Doom monster and why?
man, that's something. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I thought this would be an easy one, having played New Gothic, but
Well, I was thinking Cyber Demon, but I'm kind of like, how often do you? Yeah, it's like I can't really think like Mancubus. He's got a cool attack pattern and stuff, but he's not like the big guy. And then the Doom 1 and 2 Cyber Demon has like you have to have specific ways of actually attacking it and stuff because it doesn't have rocket splash damage. You have to do straight in, but yeah, yeah, probably Cyber Demon. It's like I was never really a Revenant fan, even though my name is kind of like slightly related to that. But
mhm. I was curious about your name. Not so much. Well, I mean, what is the origin of it actually, originally?
so I was an edgy college student.
Hmm.
Was it in college or maybe the end of high school? So I was an edgy student basically, and I had seen the card Wall of Blood, and I'm like, because I was into biology, and I'm like, white blood cells, they're like the defenders of the body and stuff. Like blood. How can I make that into like a username with other stuff? And it's like armor. Armor is cool,
Hmm.
and so it's like the fusion of armored and blood, and it kind of goes back to an earlier name I was going by, Blood Titan, from the Might and Magic series. There was an enemy called there were like the class of Titans, and then you have like three different types of Titans, and the biggest one was the Blood Titan. So I'm like, ooh,
Right.
that just yeah, yeah,
Well, the thing I was curious about is that you use the British English spelling of armored instead of the
yeah,
American one, which I always
yeah.
assumed you were from the UK or Europe or something.
No, it's funny. I'm just like, oh, that looks kind of cool. Let's do it that way. Because I was going through like a phase where I'm like, oh, British English is kind of cool with all the e's at the end and like flavored and armored and stuff. And I kind of grew out of that with
There's
the name
extra
stuff.
French U's, yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you think Cyber Demon, to go back to favorite monster, that was definitely the one that I was thinking you would pick. I was thinking of that map where you have to two-shot a bunch of them right at the beginning, or they kind of
Yeah.
build up.
Yeah. Yeah. Cyberdoom was definitely one of the monsters I liked using the most. Like it's hard to use a lot of them, otherwise it just feels kind of samey. But it's like it's really cool to have a bunch of Cyberdemons and try and make them the fight against that interesting.
Well, map 3, the ultimate Cyber Demon map.
Yeah, that one's a little lazy though, because you're just kind of like dropping between different levels and you have a bunch of invulns and stuff. Yeah, that the one you were thinking of earlier with I think it was map 12 of the Gothic one, right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, where it's just like you got the timer and all the cyber demons come in. Yeah, that's yeah, one of the best cyber demon maps. Well, there's also that training map by Time and Death where he gives you like 50 cyber
Yeah.
demons or something to two shot. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I remember that one. I think it was 9 Inch Heels who made one where you have to berserk 100 Cyber Demons or something.
Oh god, that sounds
I just remember
that'd take
Zol
a
being the
while.
only person to actually play it on stream.
They must have made that after I stopped being in the community so much.
That's what tipped you over the edge. It was that map.
Maybe, maybe.
Alright, well, you were definitely someone I thought of like very early to come on, because New Gothic for me was one of the first Slaughter WODs that I played and really enjoyed. So, and you and Archie, both of you have been like an influence on my mapping and stuff as well. It was
Okay.
interesting to talk to you, and yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, no problem, man.
Well, yeah, that'll do it for this week. Next week I will have another guest on, so Thanks everyone for listening, and see you then.